In America right now, we have statues being torn down. We have cities being set ablaze. We have vandalism of buildings. We have assaults on people and murder of people. We have history repeating itself. There's two sayings that we hear all the time if you know history. One is those who do not know history are doomed to repeat it. And the other one is the philosophy of the classroom in one generation will be the philosophy of government in the next. I've been speaking about the conversion process, the forced conversion process of our Northern Pagan ancestors to Christianity and Islam and Judaism for years now. I've also been talking about white slavery for years now. The conversion process. We see, this is the conversion process of our Northern Pagan ancestors to those three Abrahamic cults. We see a destruction of what was previous. We see tearing down of statues and throwing them into the water. What was it like for our Northern Pagan ancestors who were alive at that time when those three cults were forcing their beliefs and their politics upon them, upon our ancestral ways? Look at America. Just look at America. They're burning down cities. They're tearing down statues. They're rewriting history. They are teaching children in forced gaslighting buildings. Now it's called school, then it was called church. They are indoctrinating them so that in the next generation, that will be the philosophy at large. What was it like for our Northern Pagan ancestors going through this forced conversion process? You're living it. You just don't know history. So they tore down statues. Well, that's exactly what they did. It's written right into their Old Testament Abrahamic texts to go into the high places, the religious places, tear down the statues, burn them, burn the groves, kill the people. If you didn't convert, then you were canceled. You were dispossessed of your land, your livelihood, your wealth was taken from you. By who? By the moneyed elite. Who are the moneyed elite today? We have Hollywood, we have professional sports players, we have musicians. These are the moneyed elite who are controlling the narrative. We have statues being torn down and thrown into rivers and lakes. We have them being beheaded. We have BLM, the domestic terrorist group, Black Lives Matter, painted on them. This is what was done in the conversion process from Northern paganism to those Abrahamic cults. Statues were thrown into the water. Maybe you don't know the history of the conversion process of Russia and other Slavic lands like Poland. Perun was a statue that was a Slavic god, kind of a cross between the Norse god Odin and Thor. And he was, in Slavic belief, he was placed up on mountaintops, up in the high places. Well, once the people became woke-tards, what did they do? Through this gaslighting, this mandatory, forced educational system, they tore down the statue and they threw it into the river. Same thing, history is repeating itself. They vandalized what was pre-existing. BLM, painted on the statues, beheaded, tearing them down, dragging them through the streets. And this is how it went throughout all of our Northern Pagan ancestral homelands. They came in, they burned down our temples, they cut down our groves, they destroyed the communities where our pagan ancestors lived. They dispossessed them of land. They tore down the statues. They indoctrinated the youth that the old ways, the old gods were evil. So then that way, the next generation, the philosophy of the classroom, the philosophy of the church, will be the philosophy of government in the next. The old ways were evil. The old gods were evil. The statues must come down. And then the woke-tards take it from there. And then they did one other thing. They put in power people that they could control. They put in power people who had no right to be leadership. But now they were put in positions of leadership because those moneyed elite had control over them, and they would do their bidding under this new regime, this new era of gaslighting. We see the same thing happening today. Those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. And it's being repeated right before our very eyes. You are living the conversion process. Now, the modern man, or mankind, especially in America, has been so gaslighted. What they're saying is, this is a sign of the end times. No, this is a repeat of history. Jesus is going to come back and save us. No, there is no Jesus. He's a fake. This is just a repeat of history. That's it. You are living the conversion process. But how does this apply to white slavery? Simply that BLM is being painted everywhere. And the moneyed elite, the sports players, Hollywood, musicians, politicians who are put in place, moneyed elite who are put in place that are now controlling a narrative. BLM is being painted everywhere. Terrorist groups. Well, wait a minute. And what are they demanding? They're demanding that everybody become woke or be canceled. Now, wait a minute. How were our pagan ancestors canceled? Simply, they were dispossessed of their lands. They were forced to relinquish wealth to the new moneyed elite coming in, to the new woke-tards, gaslighted people coming in. They were forced to give up the land. They now had no means to provide for themselves. They lost their job. And they were forced to relocate. They had to start all over again. They lost their ancestral homelands. They were severed from the past. They were severed from their folk ancestral ways. What's that got to do with slavery? Well, because in the indoctrination system called education, modern education, the school system, we are severed from our past of slavery because we have these BLM groups, these Antifa groups, demanding reparations based on one color of slavery. One people being enslaved. And who are they saying it is the fault of? Us. They get rid of all history. History repeating itself. So this philosophy of education in one generation is now being played out on the streets of America. They're doing exactly what they've been trained to do. And just like with white slavery, white slaves were treated more harsh than any black slave was. And this goes back to the conversion process. This goes back to the black Muslims kidnapping, stealing white Europeans, Scandinavians, Slavic people from Europe and Iceland and the Scandinavian countries and bringing them into Africa to sell them on the trans-Saharan slave trade. All that is being, you got to forget about it. What about the Irish slave trade in the West Indies and in the American colonies? And even early American states, when these United States were formed, those white slaves who were not just Irish, but there's a lot written on the Irish. They were treated more brutal than any black slave ever was. But we're being taught about BLM painted on the statues, painted on the gods, being torn down and thrown into the lakes and rivers. History is repeating itself. As I said in my last video, one example about slavery. They were forced, the white slaves were forced by the black taskmasters to crawl on their belly to a dirty water trough in the blazing heat of the West Indies on the sugar plantations and drink from a trough of dirty water like cattle. Oh, but the woke tards will tell you only blacks were slaves. Whites were indentured servants. Tear down that statue. Tear down that god. Tear down Perun. History repeats because you don't know it. That is what is going on in America. You want to know what it was like for white slaves? You want to know what it was like to be dispossessed, canceled? You want to know what the conversion process was like to the religious cults of Abraham? You're living it. You are living it. Anyways, like, subscribe, share. Till's nest to go. Good health.